I don't know how to do nothing. 3 boys, a back injury, 5 channels in Hungarian, now this one in English. Work that doesn't have office hours, because there are no office hours when you work for yourself. And somewhere underneath all of that, somewhere I rarely get to, there's a version of me that would like to just sit for a while, without optimizing anything, without the next thing waiting. I almost never get there. Not because I don't have time, or not only because of that, but because something in me resists the stopping, even when the stopping would be the right thing, even when I can feel the depletion and know that what I need is not more doing, but less. The resistance is the interesting part. Laozi, who lived roughly 2,500 years ago and wrote one of the strangest and most useful texts in human history, had something to say about this. Not about work-life balance, not about productivity hacks or recovery optimization, about something older and harder to name. The way the river doesn't try to get to the sea, it just goes. There's a kind of tiredness that sleep doesn't fix. You know this one. You've slept enough hours, technically enough, and you wake up already carrying something. Not rested, not ready, just continuing. This is not physical tiredness. It's the tiredness of a mind that has not been given any space. The problem isn't the work, it's that the work never stops. Not really. Not even when you're not actively working, because the mental processes keep running. The planning, the worrying, the problem solving, the anticipating, the low level awareness of all the things that need to happen and haven't yet. This is the thing that doesn't get discussed clearly enough in conversations about stress and burnout. It's not the volume of what you do, it's the absence of any real off. A computer that never shuts down eventually becomes unreliable. Not because it's broken, because it needs the downtime to clear processes, consolidate memory, run maintenance that only happens when the active processes stop. The human mind is not so different. And most of us, most of the time, are running without any genuine downtime. The phone in the pocket maintains a low-level connection to everything. The to-do list is always there. The awareness of what's undone doesn't clock out. Laozi would recognize this immediately. He wrote about it without the modern vocabulary, without burnout and cortisol and parasympathetic nervous systems. But the observation is the same. To the mind that is still, the whole universe surrenders. Not the mind that has completed its to-do list, not the mind that has earned rest through sufficient productivity, the still mind. The problem is that most of us have forgotten how to produce stillness. Being a father makes this specific, because when you're with your children, you're supposed to be there, actually there, not carrying the work in your head while your body is in the room. And I am, frequently, doing exactly that. Body in the room, mind somewhere else. Not because I don't love them, not because the work is more important, because the switching off doesn't happen automatically. Because whatever I was working on before I walked in the door is still running. And they feel it. Children always feel it. They can't name it. They don't say, "Dad, your parasympathetic system hasn't engaged." But they feel the quality of attention, whether you're actually there or just physically present. The Taoist problem I'm describing is not a work problem. It's an attention problem. An inability to let the last thing actually finish before the next thing starts. Wu Wei, the central Taoist concept I want to talk about today, is partly about this. Not about doing nothing, about stopping forcing, about letting things be finished rather than carrying them forward into the next context. Laozi is historically uncertain in a way that I find reassuring. We don't know exactly who he was. The name itself means old master, possibly a title rather than a name. The book attributed to him, the Tao Te Ching, may be the work of one person or several. It dates to roughly the 4th century BCE. What we do know is what the text says. And the text is strange. It's 81 short chapters. Most of them are paradoxes, deliberately, usefully paradoxical. The usefulness of a cup is in its emptiness. The soft overcomes the hard. Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know. These are not riddles with answers. They're invitations to sit with a kind of thinking that is different from the analytical, problem-solving, optimize and execute thinking that most of us do most of the time. The Tao, usually translated as the way, is the underlying principle of how things work. Not a god in the Western sense, more like the grain of the universe, the direction in which things naturally want to move when not forced in another direction. And the teaching is essentially this. Most of human suffering comes from working against the grain, from forcing, from treating life as a problem to be solved rather than a current to be navigated. The tree that bends in the storm survives. The tree that resists rigidly breaks. Not because bending is weakness, because bending is accurate. It's the correct response to the force of the wind. Here's what makes this relevant to the exhaustion I was describing. The mind that is always pushing, always trying to get somewhere, always problem solving, always ensuring, always anticipating, is the rigid tree. Not because pushing is wrong, because the constant undifferentiated push is the wrong response to most situations. Most of what produces anxiety in a typical day is not actually a problem. It's uncertainty dressed as a problem. It's the future presenting itself as something that needs to be controlled right now, from this moment, through sufficient worrying. Worrying about whether the channel will grow doesn't affect whether the channel will grow. It only affects your present state. And it does so negatively, depleting the attention and energy that could go into making better work. The Taoist insight here is the forcing is not helping. In fact, the forcing is often the problem, not the circumstances, the relationship to the circumstances. When you stop forcing, when you work with what is rather than against what isn't, something changes. Not the external situation, the internal weather. And the internal weather is where you live. Wu Wei is usually translated as non-action. This translation is technically correct and practically misleading. It sounds passive, like the Taoist prescription is to sit and let things happen to you. That's not it. Wu Wei means effortless action. Action that is in alignment with what the situation actually requires, rather than action driven by anxiety or ego or the desperate need to control outcomes. Think of a skilled craftsperson, not forcing the wood, working with the grain, using the minimum necessary force to produce the result. Not straining, not anxious, fully engaged and yet not depleted. Or think of a good conversation, the moments where it flows, where you're genuinely listening and responding from what's actually there, not from what you plan to say. Those moments have a quality of effortlessness. Not because they require no attention, because the attention is fully present and not fighting anything. That's Wu Wei. Full engagement without forcing. The opposite of Wu Wei is what most productivity culture actually describes: the forcing, the pushing through, the grinding despite resistance, the treating of depletion as an enemy to be overcome rather than a signal to be heard. And the forcing produces results for a while. That's what makes it seductive. But the debt accumulates. The costs arrive later, and they're larger than the forcing was worth. I know this from my own experience. The periods of maximum pushing, when I was running every system at maximum capacity, producing as much as possible, treating rest as something I'd earn once the thing was done, those periods produced output. And they produced a specific quality of person on the other end. Shorter fused, less present, running on fumes and calling it discipline. The output was real. The person making it was diminished. That's the cost that doesn't show up in the metrics. Wu Wei isn't the opposite of productivity. It's the sustainable version of it. The version that doesn't eat the person doing the work. Here's the part that took me the longest to actually accept. Most of what I try to control is not actually controllable. Not in a deep philosophical sense. I know Epictetus, I've read all of that. In the daily, practical sense. Whether the video performs well. Whether the decision I made turns out to be the right one. Whether the thing I'm working on actually lands. I cannot control these outcomes. I can influence them. But influence is not control. And the energy I spend trying to control what I can only influence, the worrying, the checking, the anxiety management rituals, that energy is real and finite, and it's going somewhere that it cannot actually help. Laozi wrote, "When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you." Nothing lacking. Not nothing wrong, not no problems. But nothing lacking in the sense that this moment, as it is complete. This is extremely hard to feel when you're behind on a project, or watching metrics that aren't moving, or dealing with something that needs to be different than it is. But the feeling of lack, the constant low-level sense that something necessary is missing, that's usually not an accurate description of the situation. It's a mental state, a relationship to the situation rather than the situation itself. And mental states can shift, not through positive thinking, not through pretending things are fine, through the recognition that the forcing doesn't help, that the anxiety about the outcome doesn't improve the outcome, that the control you're spending energy trying to maintain was always partly an illusion. As a father, this shows up in a specific way. The desire to manage everything, to ensure that the right things happen for your children, to protect them from the wrong outcomes, to maintain enough control over their experience that they don't encounter things that damage them. This desire is love. It's real and appropriate. And it's also partly impossible. Children will have experiences you can't manage. They'll encounter things that hurt them. They'll make choices that go wrong. They'll be shaped by forces you didn't choose and cannot control. The control you're trying to maintain over their experience is partly an illusion too. What you can offer is presence, attention, the quality of what you bring to the time you have with them. That's actually available. It's not an illusion. The control, the management of outcomes, much of that is illusion. And the energy you spend maintaining the illusion is energy taken from what's actually available. This is the Taoist inversion. Stop fighting what you can't control. Put the energy into what you can actually offer. Less forcing, more presence. Laozi kept coming back to simplicity, not as an aesthetic preference, as a strategy. The way to do is to be. More doing doesn't solve the problem of the doing being wrong. More accumulation doesn't solve the problem of the accumulation being the source of anxiety rather than security. The modern optimization culture is obsessed with adding more systems, more tools, more structure, more analysis. The assumption is that the problems come from not enough optimization, not enough productivity, not enough control. Laozi's assumption is the opposite. Most problems come from too much wanting, too much forcing, Too much complexity where simplicity would work better. When I look at the moments in my life where I felt most okay, not most successful, most okay, they're almost always simple moments. A morning before anyone else is awake. A conversation with one of my boys that isn't going anywhere in particular. Walking somewhere without a podcast in my ears. Not optimized. Not productive in any measurable sense. Just present. Uncomplicated. Here. These moments are available more often than I access them. Because I'm usually doing something else instead. Usually adding something. Another input. Another task. Another thing to move. The simplicity is always there. It's the complexity I keep choosing. This is what the Tao Te Ching is actually about, I think. Not a prescription for a particular lifestyle. An invitation to notice that you're adding complexity where simplicity would serve you better. To notice that you're forcing where flowing would get you further. To notice that you're maintaining an illusion of control at the cost of the presence that is actually available. None of this means don't work, don't build, don't have goals and pursue them. It means notice the quality of how you're pursuing them. Notice whether the pursuit is eating the thing you're pursuing it for. You're building the channel. Is the building eating the life that the channel is supposed to eventually support? You're providing for the family. Is the providing happening at the cost of the presence with the family? You're working toward the goal. Is the working happening in a way that will leave you able to actually enjoy whatever you arrive at? These are the Taoist questions. Not soft questions. Very practical ones. I don't know how to do nothing. I said that at the beginning, and I haven't solved it. This video is not a report from the other side of a solved problem. But I understand something now that I didn't used to understand. The inability to do nothing is not a virtue. It's a habit, a pattern, a way of relating to time and effort and control that produces a specific kind of life. Busy, output generating, perpetually slightly behind. There's another pattern available. Not doing nothing. Not abandoning the work or the goals or the building, but working with the grain rather than against it. Bringing full attention rather than fractured attention. Letting the thing that's done be done rather than carrying it into the next context. Accepting that the outcomes I can't control are genuinely not mine to control. 3 boys, a back, 5 channels, this one. All of it is real and worth doing. And also, sometimes just sitting for a while, without the next thing already running. The river doesn't try to get to the sea. It doesn't push. It doesn't force. It moves the way water moves, following the path of least resistance, carving through what can be carved, flowing around what can't. And it gets there, every time. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're forcing something that might flow better if you stopped pushing. See you in the next one.